Hey there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. I'm your host, PattSun, and today we're gonna be taking a look at r/cheating stories, where OP came face to face with an actual psycho. Let's begin. And she was cheating when she said it. Posted by Reddit user Flailing Aimlessly.
We got together near the end of her first year of college. She aggressively pursued me. Later I found out she saw me with incredible potential. She changed my wardrobe, changed my friends. She spent nearly every waking moment at my side, dictating decisions. What the fuck did I know? This was my first real girlfriend. No sex though. Wait for marriage. You can put it in my ass if you want. At the near 2-year mark, I poke at the idea of slowing this train to a stop. She would quit school, throw away her scholarship, kill herself. Well fuck. 3-year mark. I haven't been happy in a while. I miss my friends. She goes on a beach trip with some friends. After she tells me she ran into a friend from high school, he hung out with them most of the trip. I'm largely depressed. A few weeks later, my new job is pulling a lot of hours from me. She asks if I'm cheating on her. She even drops into my office unannounced. I'm just there busting my ass. One night she says let's get married. She calls my parents to tell them we're engaged. I'm running out the clock, weeks left before she's out of school. Accuses me of not having time for her. She's not a month out of college when I break up with her. She spends weeks showing up at my place demanding that this is in fact not over no matter what I say. I close the door on her. She doesn't have a key anymore. I find out that she had been fucking not just anally the old friend from her trip since not too long before the trip. Since before her trip. Before her proposal. Before she accused me of cheating. Before she showed up to demand we weren't over. I had to. You were too depressed is how she excuses it. I was depressed because I didn't know how to break up with someone who threatened to kill themselves if I did.
OP, just leave. Go no contact. Inform the police if she threatens to kill herself again. Listen man, you were her golden goose, her meal ticket. She alienated you from your friends so that she could easily manipulate you. Cheaters often project their own guilt and cheating onto their partners. And when she got caught, she gaslit you, saying it was your fault as to why she cheated. This is top shelf, grade A emotional abuse. She knew that you were inexperienced, so she love-bombed you, isolated you from your friends, tried to change you, run your life, and take away your ability to make decisions. Then to keep you, she used threats of harming herself and her school career. Sure, that worked for a while, but then she felt you slipping away again, so she tried to lock you down and even lied to your parents that you were engaged. And when you finally broke free, she stalked you for weeks, refusing to let you go. That was all bad enough and psycho behavior, but add in the projection that you were the one cheating, going as far as dropping in your workplace without permission just to find out later that she was the one playing you the whole time. Did I miss anything? God damn, OP. I feel so sorry for you that you have to deal with this shit, most probably in the next few years, or probably your lifetime. Good luck with that. Don't forget to give us an update, okay? I would get a restraining order if I were you. Our second story is from r/nuclear revenge. A fitting twist. Posted by Reddit user Oscar the Grouch.
Background. I had a terrible childhood. Don't get me wrong, I have heard of way worse, but it was far from healthy or normal. When I was young, my parents were millionaires, my father's parents owning several of the largest businesses in the region. They divorced before I was a teenager and both of their lives plummeted downhill. By the time I was 16, I was living on my own. Drugs, alcohol, and addiction have long since killed them both. Neither of them ever worked a job since I was a teenager. Both of them died homeless before the age of 50. Situation. I joined the military and left town without ever looking back. As more years passed, I added more and more distance physically and mentally from my parents. When I was 20, I learned that my mother had been arrested for stealing a large sum of money from my grandmother who was living on her own, but in the beginning stages of Alzheimer's. The state ended up pressing charges against her because my grandmother would not. The detective told me that they had to because her and her piece of shit boyfriend were fueling the criminal underground where she lived. I was lost and shocked. I knew my mother had problems, but until this moment, I had always viewed her as a sort of forest hippie. This is the moment that is the catalyst for my nuclear revenge. You see, my grandmother was pretty wealthy. Terrified that she would be locked away in an old folks' home, she entertained the leeching of my mother and piece of shit guy. The problem is that it was never enough. Even after my grandmother bought my mother a house down the street from her, she continued to rob her own mother blind. She also fed my underage sister a stream of drugs and brought her in on the con. It ultimately resulted in her first felony conviction, grand theft and check fraud, which she tried to pin on her own daughter. A few years later, I was newly married with my first child and freshly returned from my first deployment to Iraq. We just completed another move across the country, and I am starting a new job at a new unit. I get home from work and have a strange short voicemail from my uncle, who is like the most okay guy I have ever met. It literally just says, "My mom is in the psych ward at the big hospital in her town. She left everything in your name. I'm flying back home." This is where I learned that the legal document my grandma had me sign when I was 16 made me the executor of her estate. Power of attorney, etc. My unit arranges a very generous amount of time off to fly across the country and deal with this bizarre scenario. She lived alone in this massive house. My mom had destroyed the house my grandmother bought her, then moved into grandma's house on the auspices of caring for her. There were so many fleas inside that contractors I hired to make repairs wouldn't go inside. Needles everywhere, and for some reason, everything was an ashtray. It was an insane thing to witness and experience. I still refused to interact with my mom at this point of my life, but now that I had the keys to the kingdom, aka access to the pot of gold, she tried to worm back into my life with a renewed vigor. I always just told her to fuck off. My grandmother, in the meantime, had been deemed unfit to live on her own. I was 23, with a new baby and marriage, if you remember, so I made the poor decision to put my grandmother into a nursing home. I fixed up the house, rented it to create passive income so she would not deplete her savings, and headed back home. Of course, Grandma is spicy and got kicked out of her swanky retirement home when she broke a coffee cup over some other lady's head for snooping around in her room. She was apparently wearing my grandmother's shoes when she got clocked. The same woman, a resident, had propositioned me in front of my wife when we were touring the facility. She was a different kind of the same spicy as Grandma. Her only option after the incident was a psych ward. So my senile grandmother moved in with my family, and she lived with us for more than 5 years until her care was just out of our capability. This is about the time that I exacted my revenge. The nuclear option. When the state filed charges against my mother way back when I was 20, part of her restitution included a lien that was placed against her property in the name of my grandmother for a little less than $100,000. Some years later, my mother had not paid her property taxes in so long that she was about to lose the house. She called me to explain that the lien would not be paid if the house was auctioned, which I knew was not true, but I saw an opportunity. I eventually worked out a deal with her. She would sign the deed over to me, and I would then sell the house and pay for her to move somewhere else. I fly to town, meet her, and sign the deed over. She expected me to use my name and credit to get her a luxury apartment. She also wanted me to buy her a new truck, and let's not forget the moving company. I rented her a U-Haul truck and got her a storage unit that I had paid for 6 months. Then I put her and shithead up in an extended stay for a little while. I fixed up the property and sold it to the same rental group that bought my grandmother's house shortly before. I used the money to buy annuities that enabled my grandmother to live in a normal house with a live-in nurse and care at 1:4 ratio, which is amazing for her. She still might run out of money because of what my mother did, and I honestly don't know what will happen then. She's got some years before I have to worry, and she is just shy of 100. My mother was on the street within 6 months. The last time I saw her, she looked like the crazy person who lives under a bridge. She did at one point. She was covered in sores, balding, and methed out. She'd received a Social Security disability back payment of what would have been a significant amount for her. She died in a hospital less than 3 days later, partied herself to death. The piece of shit dropped her off at the curb and never saw her again. I told dude I would give him some money if he gave me the key to the storage unit. Somehow, years later, she had managed to keep it. I shared the loot with my siblings, gave piece of shit $100, and closed that chapter of my life permanently.
OP, I'm hoping that your wife and kid are doing good, and cheers to you as well for dealing with this shit throughout the years. And you know what? Something about the flow of this story is a little hard for me to follow, or I don't know, maybe it's just me and maybe I'm just an idiot. But I am really glad that your grandmother is doing well now, and I'm happy that your life seems to be looking up. Well done, OP. Stay strong and keep moving forward. Our final story is from r/drew off my chest. My wife and I are about to kick our daughter out. Posted by Reddit user SD Blazer.
Don't worry, she's a grown 22-year-old college grad. She moved out but moved back to save money about a year ago. She's employed full-time, and the only financial obligation she has aside from paying for the wedding she's planning at the end of this year is her $200 a month car note. We even paid half of her tuition all 4 years of school so she wouldn't have to pay student loans for the next 30 years like my wife is still doing. She likes to complain about our meager expectations of her: dishes, laundry, keeping her space clean, being respectful and considerate of the other three of us living in the house. These shouldn't be foreign concepts to her, as she was only living away from home for 6 months before moving back in. She got engaged to a guy in a foreign country after 6 months of dating, reading and talking on the phone for hours at a time, often on speaker while pacing the halls. She has only flown down to visit him 5 times for 3 to 5 days at a time. Not enough time to know who the other person truly is, in my opinion. Their relationship is chock full of red flag behavior from both of them. She tells us she has everything figured out, but constantly presents us with examples of how ill-prepared she is for marriage and being financially independent. Recently, our dialogue has escalated from us asking that she take into account the rest of us living in the house, and how her actions affect us, to her screaming and storming off, exclaiming that she can't wait to leave. The next time we have one of these heated conversations, my wife and I are going to inform her that it is no longer in anyone's best interest for her to continue living in our house. If she is truly an adult and feels she doesn't owe us the respect due to parents who are allowing their adult child to live in their house rent-free, preparing her meals for her, and covering her living expenses, she can blaze her own trail on her own dime. It's not fair to my wife, myself, or our teenage son to live in an environment fraught with turmoil. I love her, but if she believes she would be better off without us lording our rules over her, it's time to watch the little birdie fly. Update. So maybe the original title was hyperbolic. My wife and I would never throw her on the streets, but the tension between everyone in the house was obvious and counterproductive. We never kicked our daughter out, but I did tell her during one of our heated exchanges that she might want to consider finding a place to stay if she felt we were a hindrance to her independence. She quickly shot down the idea when I told her rooms in our hometown were renting for almost as much as our mortgage payment. The argumentative nature of our interactions was still present, but after she and I had several deep discussions in the following months, things improved. A lot of our arguments revolved around her stress trying to plan a wedding, balance work, and coordinate how she'd integrate into life in a new country while still living in the US. We just happened to be the easiest target when she needed a place to unload. I'm a problem solver by nature, and it's hard for me to listen to someone vent or explain an issue and not be working on a solution in my head. I suppose my daughter really just wanted a sympathetic ear, and no input from me on how to solve her problems. I worked actively to improve the way I addressed her emotions or opinions, and things got much better. We did have a hiccup a couple of weeks before she moved. It started because of a winter coat. I had suggested that even though her new home would be in a tropical climate, it might be wise to take a winter coat or heavy jacket with her. My logic was simply that she may end up flying into a country where she'd need cold weather apparel, and without a coat, it would cost her at least $100 to get a reasonably good coat. Words were exchanged, and we agreed to disagree on the concept. Turns out she thought I was suggesting she take everything she had in the house with her because we didn't want any sign that she had ever lived in the house. I don't know how she drew the conclusion that I didn't want any trace of her from my comment, but that was what she gleaned from my advice. In the weeks before she moved, we took a beach vacation with all of us and my parents, visited my in-laws, had family movie nights, ate meals from our favorite restaurants, had bridal showers, practiced our daddy-daughter dance while crying like babies, sold her car for $2K more than what she bought it for 2 years prior, and helped her get all of her packing done. After Thanksgiving, we took her to the airport and she was gone. 2.5 weeks later, we headed down for the wedding. We met our son-in-law and his family for the first time, and despite the language barrier, we were all enjoying each other's company. I managed to dust off my 6 years of high school and college Spanish and gave my daddy's speech in both Spanish and English at the reception. The ceremony was beautiful. My daughter was beautiful. My whole family, new, extended, and immediate, were beautiful and handsome. Since the wedding, we stay in touch with each other almost every day. She's starting to see a lot of things from a different perspective, and I know a lot of that is because she has her own life now with her husband. I couldn't help but to chuckle when she explained how cold one of their honeymoon destinations was and that she was glad to have her coat. I even joked with her about how being overprepared for the situation saved her a lot of headache and some money. I've never seen her so happy, and I'm glad she found a man who loves her and treats her well. We're eagerly looking forward to having her come home to visit in about 2 months. I'm sure the pleasant outcome will probably disappoint many fellow Redditors. I mean, who doesn't love piling on a frustrated parent by shaming them and scoffing at every decision they have made to give their kid a better start than they had at her age?
Quite honestly, OP, I was waiting for one of those red flags that you mentioned earlier to come flying in everyone's face. But I guess they probably worked it out or something. Not all red flags are impossible to fix, I guess. They're most likely both young and still willing to change, especially for their new spouse and family. Quite frankly though, in today's economy, I just don't see getting married at 22 a happy ending as you said. Your 20s are hard enough without that and the kids that are probably going to start showing up soon. Anyways, I hope everything works out for the two of them, OP. Be well. Viewer support is the best way for me to remain independent and continue bringing you these daily videos, which will always be here on my YouTube channel for you to watch absolutely free. So consider clicking that super thanks just below the video title, or you can use my PayPal in the description box down below. Thanks for listening, everyone. If you even somewhat enjoyed today's story, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, and if you really like it, make sure to subscribe to PattSun to never miss a future upload. Stay strong.